welcome to another Bookmanager tutorial. I'm your host, Trevor, and today we're going to be talking about printers, a very common support call in regards to just getting your printer going when it was working before and all of a sudden it stops working. So our first step really is to check the printer's queue, the Windows printing queue, and oftentimes when we get calls about printers, it's simply the printer queue has become jammed up. It's got documents stuck in it and it just needs to be cleared, and that will fix your problem. So to do that, we go down to your control panel, and for those of you who are using Windows 10, they've kind of hidden the control panel. So this is your first little side tip, how to get your control panel back. And the way I do it is I go down to my start menu here, so the little window icon in the bottom left hand corner, and if you right click that icon, you can then choose the search option here. This will then allow you to type in the word control, and you can just start to type it and it'll come up with best match control panel. What I often then do is pin this icon to my taskbar. So I've got it right down here, always persistent on my screen, because I'm always jumping in and out of here, and it's just handy to have kind of as a quick link. So what you can do there is right click the control panel here and select pin to, well, it'll say pin to taskbar. In my case it's already pinned, so it's saying unpin, but that's just a quick way of getting it to remain here so you don't have to do this every time. So with the control panel open, whether you pin it or not, usually what I like to do is view icons, view everything by small icons, because then I can find my devices and printers quite quickly. And if you're constantly having to go in here and tweak your printers because they seem to just disconnect every few weeks, it may be a good idea to also create a desktop shortcut for this as well. So you can either you can right click this and pin it to your start bar. So if I wanted this to appear in my start, I could click on pin to start, and now when I click my start, I've got devices and printers always here as well as a button. Or you could say create a desktop shortcut for it. You can right click and create a shortcut for it, but either way, again, it may be handy to just pin it to your start so that it's always here, so that you can access it real quick next time you need to get in here. So when we're in your devices and printers area, it's going to list all of your installed printers. You will usually have one printer for your receipt printer, and maybe your main OfficeJet printer for invoices, and then maybe a label printer. So in the case of, say, your receipt printer has stopped working, what you can do is you can double click the printer in question, and then it's going to bring up its print queue. And again, most oftentimes when we get calls about printer issues, we're just simply going in here and seeing a bunch of documents queued up, but obviously they're stuck. So then what we can do is select printer and then cancel all documents. So if I click yes to this, that has now unjammed the queue, and sometimes it takes a few minutes for this to happen. Maybe, if you had 5 documents jammed up, 4 of them would be removed and then 1 of them would be lingering, and it takes a few minutes for that to clear out. Other times it may even require the restart of your computer, but you should, if you are patient, see this queue cleared out, and at which point you can then go back into Bookmanager and try printing again. So that's your step 1. Step 2, if that doesn't help anything and your printer still isn't working, there's a way to reset the printers on the printer side of things. So the printer's own memory may be jumbled up with something, and so you can actually reset the printer manually. To manually reset your receipt or label printer outside of Windows, you can do it on the hardware. You're going to need the power button and the feed button. So the way you do this is you turn the printer off, and with the printer turned off, you hold down the feed button, and with the feed button held, you turn the printer back on. A test receipt will spit out, and when it's finished printing, you can press the feed button a second time, and you just tap it once. It'll do another test print, and then you can press the feed button a third time. The third press will simply advance the paper a little bit, and so you're on the right track at that point. But this method can be used with both receipt printer and the cognitive label printer. After you've reset it, you've gone back to Bookmanager, tried to print something, a label or a receipt, and it is still not printing. Your next area you want to check is the printer name. Occasionally what happens is Windows will go through an update and it will change the name of your printer driver. So Bookmanager is expecting your printer to be named one thing, and Windows has changed it to something else. So it's an easy check. It's less common, but if you have given your printer a custom name, for example, say right now the Bixlon SRP 350 Plus here, maybe I had named it to Receipt to simplify it, for network sharing and the rest. Well, maybe during a Windows update, it could have renamed it back to the kind of standard name. So Bookmanager is expecting a label or a receipt printer called Receipt when really it needs to be called this Bixlon. So to check that, you want to go into your Bookmanager software, do an Alt-S for setup. So that can be done anywhere in the system, Alt-S as in setup. Then you want to go down to option I for printers. Within here, this is where you can arrow down to the printer in question and just have a look at the name right here. So if I'm looking at my receipt printer right now, type connected to Bixlon SRP 350 Plus 3. So you can make sure that this name matches what's in your control panel here. You can also, doesn't hurt just to press to go into this field and page up, and then go and reselect on the printer you want to use. So go back down the list, find the printer you want to use, and press enter. This is just, again, to make sure that everything, spaces, case, everything is entered just exactly how it's expecting in Windows. So that's a good place to check. After you've done this, made the check here or re-entered the printer's name, you can page down to save that setting and then go back in Bookmanager and do a test print receipt or print a label. If that doesn't work, if your label or receipt printer is still not working, then I'd recommend restarting your computer, trying, having a look again, trying to print something. And if that restart doesn't work, then it's probably time to give us a call, because there may be something more involved to get it going. It may be just the printer itself could have a bad USB connection, so you may want to try unplugging the printer's USB cable, the end on the computer side, and find a different USB port to plug the printer into, because sometimes your USB port itself goes bad. It's happened to my computer where a port will just stop working, or it just needs to be, maybe the fitting isn't exactly right. So rather than say just wiggling the cable, I always recommend just to unplug it, find a new port, and pop it back in and see if that does the trick. When you're changing USB ports, I'd recommend turning off the computer first, then finding a new port, plugging it in, and then turning the computer back on. Those are our kind of quick tips for doing printer support. We do it every day, and that seems to get it 99% of the time. So hopefully this will help you out the next time you're having some printer troubles.